definitely the perception in Western Europe and North America is that Ukrainians are cold as the temperature is on the Siberian plains or on the steppe in eastern Ukraine. So that's what I'm going to try and answer for you guys today. Is that really true?
Experience.
So I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment right in the center of Lviv, lovely Lviv, and I actually found this apartment using Dubovo.com. I'm going to link those guys below, and this is an alternative for finding short-term rented accommodation in Ukraine, very similar to Airbnb, but it's a good alternative, and as a former competition lawyer, antitrust lawyer, I love competition, more choice, lower prices in general. So definitely go and check that out. Going to link it below. Also be sure to use my special discount code for 200 hryvnia off. That's Connor, so go down and have a look at it. Anyways, I'm rambling on again, as I normally tend to do in these little short intros. Come to Ukraine, check out Dubovo, make sure to hit that discount code, and let's get into today's episode of the Vodkast. Всем привет, and welcome back to another episode of the Vodkast with me, Connor Klein. This is the Zara Experience, and today I'm speaking to you from lovely, beautiful Lviv in Western Ukraine. You can just see behind me the old town just about there. Here in front of the Opera House, you have one of Ukraine's most beautiful opera houses just over there, and it's a fantastic evening. It's a little bit chilly in the air, and I'm actually coming down with a little bit of a cold I've been feeling since yesterday, and that's a very apt, unfortunately, for this video, because the question that I've decided to answer spontaneously, I just decided yes to put together this little quick episode of the Vodkast because it came up in conversation when I was in Kiev, and that is whether Ukrainians are cold or warm. And definitely the perception in Western Europe and North America is that Ukrainians are cold as the temperature is on the Siberian plains or on the steppe in eastern Ukraine. And so that's what I'm going to try and answer for you guys today. Is that really true? And where does that stereotype actually come from, that they are cold relative to people in other countries? Now, the first thing that I'm going to highlight is that the temperature does make a big difference, because if you were to take, say, within Europe itself, people in Southern Europe where the temperatures are warmer are generally seen as warmer themselves in terms of personality than people in Northern Europe, like we're thinking Scandinavia even, where people are seen as a bit more cold and distant. Now that doesn't always hold true. I'm going to go into a little bit later in today's episode of the Vodkast about my experience of living in southern Germany, for example, where people were, I felt personally, a little bit more colder than people in other parts of Europe, despite the geographical location. And it's definitely true that that's the perception overall, but in particular, it's the perception of people in Eastern Europe, and not just people in Ukraine, but that can be Poland, for example, or people further to the east in Russia, maybe in the Baltics and further north as well. And does it have something to do with the temperature? Well, to a certain extent, yes, because if it's as cold as this, then just your face naturally is not going to be as welcoming or as warm looking on first glance than someone who's in, subtropical temperature, like Brazilians, for example. Having spent a lot of time in Brazil, they definitely come across as very warm, and that actually holds true in general in that culture for sure. So that's the first thing, is the temperature and the weather gives that impression. Now, it's also warm here during the summer. You wouldn't think it today. Although we do have some sunshine, thankfully. But still people have that perception that even if they were to come to summer, that people are cold. So what is the second element that goes into this stereotype? It's definitely a hangover from the communist past, because if you come here as a traveler, then you're obviously going to meet people in the service industry, like in hotels. Maybe you have to go to the bank, maybe you go to a restaurant, you go to a bar. And definitely the older generation did not have the same concept of polite service that has become a lot more, I think, common today amongst the younger generation. That's how people basically are not particularly warm and friendly to you if they are serving you somewhere. They kind of see it maybe as kind of like not as something that you should enjoy, but something that they have to do. Now that used to be the old mentality. It's also pretty common in some parts of Western Europe as well. Like the French are not renowned for their polite service. Same when I was in Vienna in Austria, for example. I didn't really get that impression either, but definitely here amongst the older generation, especially if you go to somewhere like the bank. I think maybe in restaurants it's normally younger people are normally the waiters, then it's probably not as noticeable, but definitely when you have to deal with public service, there is not a focus on giving you amazing customer service in general. And that can often be your first experience of the country, is like going to a restaurant, hotel, dealing with maybe people in uniforms, and it tends to be a little bit frosty because they don't have that emphasis on personal service. And that's not just here in Ukraine, that's basically most of the former Soviet Union and even the Warsaw Pact, so basically the communist countries, there was not that emphasis on customer service. And especially if you come from North America, where there's a very high emphasis on it, actually maybe even excessively so, trying to make you feel welcome so they can get that big juicy tip at the end of your stay at the restaurant, then that's definitely going to contribute towards that negative stereotype about Ukrainians being cold people. Now, the other element that's important to discuss is that people tend to be very direct and very blunt when they're expressing themselves, especially if they're expressing themselves to you in English, which is not their first language. Like it's in Russian, or here we're in Lviv, so it's Ukrainian is the language that's spoken most. People tend to not use very many kind of softer words. Like in German, you would use these little small words like den, for example, or to kind of communicate a little softness in something that's direct that you're asking for. In English, we definitely do that a lot. Of course, would you like, could you give me please, for example. It's kind of like overdoing it to a certain extent. Less so in Romance languages. They tend to be a little bit, less verbose when they speak. But definitely here, they cut it down to a minimum. You can basically just say exactly what you want, and you don't have to really say please. That's not necessarily an obligation in say Russian or Ukrainian, for which I know quite well here. So that also, that kind of directness or bluntness can, it comes across as impolite, especially if English happens to be your first language, and definitely if you come from a culture in Western Europe, people tend to be more polite. Then this bluntness and directness can, leave you feeling that people are also a bit cold, and that kind of contributes to it. So I've seen that as mainly a linguistic and cultural difference. It's not obviously an indication of whether people are generally warm or cold towards you. Now, the next point, and probably one of the most important, most interesting, and definitely the most relevant to here in Ukraine, is that in general, people don't trust strangers as much because there's a low level of trust amongst the population in general. There isn't a very strong rule of law here in Ukraine. Corruption is rife. And people are very wary of strangers when they meet them for the first time, so their kind of defenses are up, so they're not going to be smiling like if you go to Brazil, everyone's like to the bang and giving you a thumbs up and smiling at you. That doesn't happen here. Basically, people have a lower level of trust with strangers, and as a result, they tend to be a little bit more distant and not likely to smile at you unless they actually know you at least a little bit, or you say something incredibly funny. So yeah, that's definitely probably the most important difference is this low level of trust, and kind of social smiling is not part of the culture here. In fact, if you were to go around smiling at strangers, people probably think that you're a bit crazy, to be honest, because it's not something that normal people who are socially calibrated would be doing within the culture. So just bear that in mind. If you come in with your maybe North American, very upbeat and smiley face and going, to strangers on the street, hey, how you doing? Probably people would just ignore you, not greet you, because they're like, what is this lunatic want? What does he want from me? Why is he smiling to me? Why is he coming with his big smile like he's a complete mental case? So definitely you have to be aware of that if you come here, that those are the social norms. It is not a reflection on whether people are generally warm or cold towards you. It is just this initial kind of public persona when you're going to meet people that's very different than what we have, say, in North America or in parts of Western Europe. It's not always that warm in Western Europe, to be very frank about it. So what is the reality like here in Ukraine when you come? I would say that it's actually, once you kind of pierce that initial what might appear to be cold and austere ice queen if it happens to be a girl. Exterior, that people are extremely warm and friendly, and actually very emotional in general. Completely the opposite of what you would expect if you haven't really traveled here and experienced the culture in Ukraine. Definitely people are a lot more open and interested in inviting you into their inner circle in Ukraine in general. Now it is of course a lot less in big cities where there are a lot of tourists, because obviously anywhere that gets touristic, people tend to have that initial kind of more distant relationship with tourists. But definitely overall in Ukraine, people are extremely warm, and they are definitely up for showing you the best of their country, and they're very proud to do that. So definitely don't be put up at a kind of colder maybe exterior that you might have been even through culture been conditioned to expect here. And it's not just here in Ukraine. I would say that it's pretty similar in Russia and Belarus, which are the two neighboring countries, and Moldova as well. I definitely classify them as being pretty similar in that regard. So let me give you a few anecdotes to illustrate what I'm talking about. I told you before, for example, to give you a contrast first, that I lived in southern Germany in Munich, and their people tend to be quite polite by German standards. And I know Germans are not known for being maybe the warmest Europeans, but they are in the center of the continent. At least it depends where we draw the continent, but we'll say politically at least we see them as the center of the continent, not really northern, although it does go up to the Baltics, but in the south it's of course bordering down onto Switzerland and Austria. And then if you were to take Germanic peoples in general, we go all the way to northern Italy. Now their people in Bavaria, where I was living, are, as I said, a little bit more polite. In public, they tend to smile, I think, more than other Germans, and they definitely use that politeness, very similar to what we have in English. But man, were they cold-hearted in my experience of living there. I worked with people, obviously I socialized a lot. I lived close to 2 years in Munich, a little bit under 2 years, and really people didn't open up and really in general try to show me their city or befriend me in the same way that I would have expected, having lived in lots of other countries like in the US, Italy, France, Belgium, the Netherlands. Obviously I grew up in Ireland, and I spent a lot of time in Brazil, as well as now having spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe. And I have to say it was probably the coldest place to actually spend time in terms of once you get over that initial piercing of someone being a stranger and getting to know them. I found it actually really cold, and that really was a surprise to me, because when I had visited and because of the politeness, I had thought, well, people seem friendly, but that didn't really seem to be the case. They weren't that warm in my experience. And definitely, of course, everyone's going to write their comments below about your own personal experience, and definitely go ahead and do that if you had a different one, whether it's in Germany or Eastern Europe. Now, contrast to Eastern Europe, I've spoken in a previous episode of the Vodkast about my trip to Vinica with my sensei. It was our first trip together in Eastern Europe, and we really had just like these crazy things that happens all over on the trip throughout the region. But Ukraine was no different, and I'm going to link that up in the card now. And also below in the description, I'm going to put the link, and you can see how we got on in Vinica. But we were basically invited to like crazy sauna party, and all this madness started to happen. And that's something that has not happened to me to the same extent in other countries in Europe further to the west. There was other, it wasn't the only sauna party I was ever invited to, but I haven't put it up in a Vodkast episode quite yet. But definitely overall, I've been invited to a lot more events and have people open up and show me their, invite me to their place, cook for me in general in Eastern Europe overall than I would say in Western Europe. Now, I am also not, a little bit more of a novelty maybe, and maybe you can write if you're actually Ukrainian, whether Ukrainians would be that way inclined themselves, especially with, I think with the low level of trust, they probably wouldn't do that so much with strangers so willingly if they were not foreign. But amongst their people they get to know a little bit, they definitely seem to be, in my experience, a lot more open to inviting you things and including you and being warm and showing you the best of their culture than I've experienced in Germany and southern Germany for sure. Because remember, I was there for 18 months and I did have a social circle and I was working there, but definitely the reaction was very different to what I experienced here in Ukraine and all over the Eastern Bloc, to be honest. So definitely one thing that does help, of course, with people feeling closer to you, and it's very similar to Irish culture where I grew up, is over alcohol people bond together, and that's definitely no different here in Ukraine. In Ireland, you would go down to a local pub and lots of people are going to talk to you as if you were a stranger to the country, and people are very open in that way. And I think it's very similar, obviously, here. You grab a vodka. Lots of times, I remember I went to Chernihiv, which is like 2 hours north of Kiev, and I remember walking into a local club, and then I know the local guys in the place just started like drinking with me, inviting me in, brat, let's get acquainted and drink whiskey and vodka together. And that happens pretty frequently with local people in general, whether it happens to be in a social setting or just, maybe I bond with someone over coffee who happens to be at a table nearby or something like that during my normal work day. So I'm often in cafes with my laptop, and that happened a lot less, as I was saying, in places like Germany. I'm just trying to think of my own culture, Ireland. I think it's also pretty open, even though we are considered pretty north in Europe. We're kind of like maybe the Italians of Northern Europe in terms of our warmness and friendliness. I definitely think that's a cultural trait that I appreciate, having grown up in it. So there's my feelings and thoughts about whether Ukrainians are cold or warm in general, despite the stereotypes that you're going to hear maybe if you've never visited. It's not true overall. In my personal experience, I found Ukrainians very warm. I also find them very emotional, especially if they get into relationships. With Ukrainian women, and I know a lot, but obviously you guys, if you watch my channel, are interested in dating Ukrainian women. That's the main reason you come and listen to my stories and maybe my kind of like traveling stories, and girls show up, and my videos where a lot of pretty girls obviously appear in them. And in my experience, despite this kind of ice queen reputation that many Ukrainians or Russians, the same, or Belarusians have, in fact, once they have that connection with you, they become very emotional. I would say on a scale of emotions, less than Brazilians and less than, say, Southern Europeans like Italians, where they can be extremely emotional and melodramatic, but more emotional than, say, in my experience, Irish women or British women, French women, and definitely German women. Oh God. So that's also probably another big surprise for you guys, that once you pierce that veneer, don't expect your Ukrainian girlfriend, lover, wife to be an emotionless I'm trying to think of something other than ice princess and ice queen to say as a description, but you know what I mean. Definitely be prepared for someone who's a lot more emotional and definitely going to have that volatility on that scale. So if you have dated girls from other countries in Europe then, or maybe Latin America, then you'll probably get a good idea on the scale where I'm talking about. It's definitely more on the emotional side than maybe you're going to be expecting. So be aware of that before you get involved with a Ukrainian. Not that it's a bad thing, but just know that that's probably going to be the case. So if you have traveled here to Ukraine, or maybe somewhere else in a neighboring country that has the same reputation about being cold, especially with visitors, then drop me a comment below and let me know about your personal experience. You're not just telling me, Connor, about what you think, you're also telling all the other viewers here, regular viewers. We're building up this great community of guys who are really passionate about Eastern Europe and traveling here, and dating beautiful women, of course, is part of that. And if you've had personal relationships and you found the girls to be full of emotion or emotionless, or lacking in it, whatever, definitely let me and the other viewers know about that. Love reading your personal anecdotes myself as well. And if you're new to the channel, this is the Czar Experience with me, Connor Klein. I focus on, at least for the last year, I've been making content here exclusively in Eastern Europe, and I'm giving you a window into my experience here as a Western European traveling in Eastern Europe to countries like Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Romania. Going to be going soon to the Baltics, like Latvia seems to be on the cards, and I'm really looking forward to going and filming probably later in the year in Russia, maybe Central Asia. Kind of keen to go to Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan at the moment. So if you are curious about this region, you've been here at your own personal experience, then definitely this is a channel for you. So go and squeeze that red subscribe button and make sure that you whack the notification bell beside it, because that's how you get notified when I upload new videos here on YouTube. And if you're planning to visit the region, and you want your own personal wingman, tour guide, coach for traveling around here, staying safe, not getting scammed, and definitely if you're interested in dating beautiful women, yeah, not getting, you're having problems. Maybe you've already, been writing, communicating with some girls here in Eastern Europe, like some of my clients do before they hire me, and I can do all that vetting and see that they're actually genuine and all that stuff. You're not going to get scammed of your money. And also how you just meet people in real life here. I'm not personally a huge fan of apps. A lot of my clients do use them, and I'm not against them per se, because especially if you come for a short time, it can be a way to meet people and meet, girls who are going to be interesting for you to get to know when you're here on your trip. But actually, I don't really think it's necessary. I think if you stay for a reasonable amount of time in the region, you will get to know the great people in general of it, and of course the beautiful girls and the ones that are going to be a good fit for you. So if you're interested in that, then write me an email, because you can reach out to me at connorklein@zaraexperience.com or DM me on Instagram. My handle is zaraexperience. And I'm going to link all that below. It's always in the description to these videos. Write me a message and we can kind of hop on a call and see if it's a good fit for both of us to work together. Especially coming up to summer months, I have a lot of interest. So probably if you're watching this, I'm recording in early March, so hopefully it's out in the next week or two. This is actually a pretty good time, because especially if you don't have to travel very far, I think it's actually better at times to come a little bit out of season in terms of having a really good local experience, because when you come in high season at times, there are a lot of tourists, and that changes the dynamics a lot. But anyways, if you're interested, we can get on a call, short call, 10 minutes, and discuss it further if it looks like we're a good fit to work together. It is coming to the end of the evening in Lviv. I'm supposed to fly to Minsk in Belarus tomorrow, and that's one of the places I'm really excited about making content for you guys. So all that good stuff is coming up. We're going to have a winter vlog from Minsk, the capital of Belarus, just about to publish probably tomorrow. Not when you see this, because obviously it'll be in the past. I'm going to release that, so I'm finally happy to get one vlog out, because I've been filming quite a bit over the last while in Belarus. I'm super excited about it as a travel destination for you guys. I think you're going to be really interested in it. Being back in Ukraine for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's still a remarkable country. I really love it here. So I know you guys are really curious, or you've had your own experiences here and feel the same way. I'm rambling on. I don't know why. It's getting cold, and I need to get out of here and get to enjoy the lovely Lviv atmosphere in the evenings. So, do побачення. I'm not going to say in Russian because we're in Lviv, and this is predominantly Ukrainian-speaking city, so I'm going to have to speak in Ukrainian all evening, which has been a little bit of a challenge because I haven't spoken so much in the last year. See you all in the next video. Might be from Belarus. It's probably going to be from Belarus. And maybe see you all soon, or you in particular here in Lviv or another city in Ukraine. Bye-bye.
Zara Experience.